Welcome back, I'm Tedward. Welcome to the 2024 Buick Envista. This is the ST trim level, the Sport Touring right in the middle. And welcome to Michigan. Ann Arbor is incredibly smoky right now because of the wildfires in Canada, so I am breathing at my own risk. But here we have the new upscale cousin of the Chevy Trax. It's powered by a 1.2 liter 3-cylinder turbo making 136 horsepower and 162 pound-feet of torque. It's only a front-wheel drive car. There are no all-wheel drive options for this. And this small crossover slots into Buick's new SUV-only lineup. And as you can tell from the shape of this thing, they've gone a little more swoopy and classy than that of the Trax. Although I do love the Chevy Trax. I think all of the squarish lines on that fit really well, whereas this one has more of that fastback hatch vibe to it. And up front, a big design change for Buick. I think the new language is speaking more to the future of the brand that they hope, I'm sure, will start to become incredibly strong in the US. Now, the beauty of the Buick Envista is its price. This one in the mid-trim level is about $25,000. Now, 25 grand is not a lot of money when it comes to cars these days. Most people are spending upwards of $45,000 or $50,000, and to get something that even remotely says luxury for under $30,000 is basically unheard of. But what you're getting over the Chevy Trax in this car, nicer seats, a little bit of leather, softer touch points. Now, this is not an incredible piece of material. This is still not wildly expensive. This isn't nice leather, but you do get cool deviated stitching. But what I will say is that this little pad right here has just a little bit of give, and I'm telling you, it makes all the difference on a road trip when you've got that little bit of foam. It makes it so much easier on your arms, your elbows. Same goes for the center armrest. But you're also getting an incredibly practical family vehicle that can seat 5 with a lot of legroom. And I think because this doesn't have any all-wheel drive trickery, this is nice and flat. So that way, even your middle passenger does not have to sit on some giant hump for a drive shaft to come through. Pretty darn good. Back here, there are no HVAC controls or anything, but you do have this cubby instead, which I suppose you could put a phone while you're charging it with your USB-C or your regular USB chargers. But I can't stress enough how nice it is to have legroom in a vehicle like this, because although it's supposed to be a Buick, it's a slightly more upscale version of the Chevy. It would have been so easy to overlook the rear passengers in what is essentially an economy car. But this is really well done. This is well executed. But what you don't get, unfortunately, is a center armrest back here. And I think that would have gone a long way in separating this and differentiating it from the Trax. Capless filler, of course, that's lovely. And around back, I think the design language of this hatch is really nice. I dig this sort of little spoiler that's molded into that rear hatch, and this just looks fantastic. You've got what appear to be 3 parking sensors here, here, and then this one guy right down here, and of course your camera. And the cameras on these are fantastic. But ready for this? Oh, yes, an electric hatch. That is not something you get on the Chevy Trax, so boom, there is some money right there. Plenty of cargo space back here, despite the angular design of this hatch. And back here, underneath, oh my goodness. Guys, this is luxury. A spare tire. In this world, in 2023, that is a rare sight, and I am thrilled. I'm genuinely excited because I was not expecting to see that. So there you go. You don't have to go try to finagle some aftermarket spare for your Envista. It comes with one. Oh, you're going to look like such a baller next to your friends with Chevy Trax when you hit that. Yeah. Let's take a look under the hood. Now up front, you're gonna notice new badging. That is Buick's new branding, a new take on their Trident logo. Pretty clever. And then, oh, under here, under this very heavy hood, is our little power plant, our little 3-cylinder guy, a little 3-cylinder turbo that has more torque than horsepower. So you kind of ride that low end and you're just always puffing into that turbo when you need the juice. And I'm actually kind of excited to see that its oil spec is 5W30 and not like 0W10 like it seems everything else in the world is doing right now. This has real oil in it, so that's nice to see. Probably won't spin a bearing. But I'm glad to see that they didn't just go chrome everywhere. There's a slight mix of piano black, the paint, and the chrome, and I think it all kind of melds together nicely. It's not ostentatious, and it's not grandma spec chrome, because that is just not the move. Gluing us to the road on an optional 19-inch wheel in this spec is a 245 section tire all around. I anticipate that this car is going to need to ride a little softer and a little quieter than the Chevy Trax, so let's take it out for a ride and see how it performs. To start, first we see our big Buick logos showing up on both of our LCD screens, and then we have a start-stop button right here. Nice and quiet. It has Apple CarPlay. It has nice climate controls that you can control with knobs and switches. Now, these don't feel incredibly premium. These are a little cheap. This is something that I think like Honda does really well. They take essentially cheap plastics, but they make them feel really premium. So this, although it has a nice click, it's not that impressive. But the fact that there are buttons here at all and we didn't go to some silly integrated touchscreen for the HVAC, thank you, thank you. I'm not actually complaining. You've got a sunroof, tilt, and retract, of course, but they're two different switches. I feel like that's maybe overkill. Could have done it in one, but I don't know their customer base. Maybe they did some market research and their people liked that better. And we still have a very long distance, that throw from park to drive, holy cow, just like the Chevy Trax. So the 6-speed automatic transmission is much preferable over a CVT. I'm so thankful that they put a proper 6-speed auto in these cars because it just makes them more livable. But they're still not dialed into the most luxurious level. You know, kind of getting this off the line in some certain situations is occasionally clunky, but not unbearable or unforgivable. They got the steering wheel size correct. This is perfect. This is exactly what you want to see. I don't want to have some big fake giant steering wheel just to make me feel like I'm in something sporty when I don't need to. This is nice. It fits in the hand really well. And man, oh man, do I have tons of room down here. My knees definitely, unless I try, are not going to be hitting the steering column. Volkswagen, take note, because those are always a little frustrating. Rear visibility is a little bit limited because of the small area of, oh, is that where I want to go? I do. I want to go here. Cool. Nice brakes. But that little window in the back, man, it's a little tight. But I still have really good visibility over the shoulder because that nice long rear glass allows me to see everything behind me, which is fantastic. What you don't want to do is get into a daily driver car and sure, it looks cool and swoopy and all that good stuff, but if you feel like you can't safely enter or exit a highway and merge, well, you're in the wrong car, because if you're driving that every day, you're just putting yourself at risk. So good on them for proper visibility. Ooh, this is quieter than the Trax on the highway. Really nice, much more refined, feeling stable, living up to the Buick nameplate. That's good. What we don't want to see is we don't want to just see some slightly better materials and leather. We want to make sure that we can experience a better ride in the car as well. What's amazing though is that this doesn't cost that much more than the Trax. This isn't like a $10,000 add-on. This is only like a couple $1,000s. So, you know, you can basically pick this or the Trax depending on what you want. But more importantly, I feel stable. I don't feel like I'm in an econo car. I don't feel like I'm getting blown around. I feel like I'm in an appropriate vehicle that a proud adult could own and operate and feel good about getting into every day and probably feel comfortable driving. I am occasionally frustrated by the switchgear on the steering wheel. It's not bad, it's just, you know, there's arrows pointing up and down. These are not things you press. It's just like indicating to me apparently that, yes, this scrolls up and down. I mean, I would have known that because it's a scrolly wheel. I already know that information. So sometimes that's a little annoying because I'm like hunting for something that isn't there. But that's okay. You'd get used to it if you owned it. So while it's certainly not fast, it has enough juice off the line. This is something that I really am glad that it has an automatic transmission, because in a CVT, I just feel like this wouldn't get off the line that quickly. That's very frustrating. For example, in a car like a Honda HR-V, which is pretty much directly positioned in this vicinity for this type of segment, it doesn't get off the line that quickly. It may have a slight horsepower advantage, but it doesn't have a torque advantage, and it doesn't seem to be able to transfer that energy to the wheels instantaneously from a dig because of the transmission. That's very frustrating. And so this driveline, although not the best thing in the world and still slightly clunky, it's better than a CVT, and I think that was a really wise choice on Buick's part. Those downshifts when you go for power sometimes take a little bit of time. Sometimes they hit a little hard. These seats are lovely. They're roomy. They're not the most supportive thing in the world, but you would not be chucking this into corners. They're appropriate for people of all sizes. I'm pretty skinny, but I fit really well in them, and they're not snug at all. A large person could certainly comfortably find themselves in these seats. Low end torque doing us all of the favors. And it still handles okay. I mean, it's not a sports car, but it's direct, it's intuitive. I'm not letting the car get ahead of me because of anything vague. It's got light steering, but I can still tell what's going on. It goes where I point it. I know that sounds like a really dumb thing to say about a car, but there are cars where you do feel like you're wondering, like, I made this input, what's going to happen? I have no question about what's going to happen with this vehicle. And the damping of the steering in the Envista feels a little more luxurious than that of the Trax. I think the Trax is slightly more darty, and this gives me a little more of a luxury car vibe. Rolling, cruising down this street, the suspension, it's supple, it's nice, but it's not disappearing the road, so I still understand what's going on. It's still tactile. We're talking about a nearly impossible task here. You've got a sort of luxury brand making an econo car. You've got something that's $23,000 to $28,000 depending on trim level, and it needs to perform in a way that makes people feel like it's upscale. And the ride quality is doing that. I'm actually pretty impressed with this. The touch points on this Envista are nicer than that of the Trax that I recently drove. In fact, the number one thing that I complained about in the Trax was this right here. If you're on a long drive, the Trax had a very hard surface on the door. Now, this isn't leather. It isn't anything outrageously expensive, but it has just a tiny bit of give. There's like a little thin layer of sort of foam padding between the hard plastic beneath and the softer surface above where you actually make contact. And that is just enough. It's just enough. It is literally the bare minimum, but it does the job of making this more supple and comfortable on your elbows, on your forearm, if you're just kind of cruising like this. Same goes for this armrest. This doesn't have any give, but it is a soft-ish material, and they've made use of those materials to just make them feel slightly more premium and luxurious. Let's see how she does from a dig. There's 60. Takes a little bit of time, but it gets there. It chirps the wheels a little bit. You can tell that the first rollout doesn't have a whole lot to give until that turbo boosts up and starts providing some oxygen, and then we're off. Loop here. Turning radius, not the most impressive in the world, but my goodness, does this have a lovely rear view camera. Much higher quality than that of my Honda Civic Type R. I have got to give them that. So for a little 3-cylinder, it does okay. I think the limiting factor isn't actually even the engine. It's probably just the transmission, where it just has that sort of delay in the upshifts. And I'm not looking for some lightning quick ZF8 speed in an Aston Martin. No, I just want it to be a little more cohesive on those upshifts. But man, is this smooth, even on these 19-inch wheels. And for what it is confidence inspiring. It doesn't encourage me to be bad, but you could be, and it's handling okay. Let's give a little brake check. The most abusive you're ever probably going to see a Buick driven of this era. So overall, I think that Buick actually achieved what I think they set out to do, which was to make a more upscale version of the Trax, but at an alarmingly affordable price. This could have been a money grab. This could have been something that was going to get inflated heavily, except that I think using this platform for good, essentially making sure that this was an attainable thing, bolsters the Buick brand. I don't know how Buick's doing. I know there's other markets that really love Buick, but it's not something that I've shopped for in a very long time. And to be honest, I just don't know their lineup that well. But what I can say is that if this is what they're doing, and they're not just, you know, slapping on some standard leather, they're actually going for it and making a car more their own. The same way that I see Acura doing that with Hondas. They may look and seem like, oh, it's just a reskinned version of the lower car. But when you drive them, they're nuanced. What's interesting about this is the fact that its upscale nature is not accompanied by a ridiculously upscale price. This is still wildly affordable for what you're getting. And I think if you want a vehicle that kind of feels luxurious on the inside, you're not a driver, you're not an enthusiast, you don't necessarily care that it's got a slightly laggy transmission and maybe not much power, and it's not some enthusiast hoon, but still a reasonable and formidable chassis, this is going to do you just fine. I look at this as someone who maybe needs transportation but doesn't want to drive just an econo box. It's not fair. It's not fair that if you don't have a lot of money or you don't really care about cars that much, that you're just forced into something embarrassing or unbecoming, a Scion XB or the old Chevy Aveo. You know, no offense to the drivers of those cars, but I know that's about the money you want to spend on a car, and sometimes that's what you're left with. And it looks like you took the lowest common denominator. It looks like you're driving that car because you have to. And with cars like the Chevy Trax and now this Buick Envista, it allows people to spend very little money on something that they can still be proud to show up in. And I think that is a wonderful thing to do for the public. We need more of that because car prices are astronomical. So I think you should go drive one of these. My first impressions are actually pretty good. I like it. As a buzz around, if I had this to just get around to work and back, it's nice to look at. It's nice to drive. This is all right. Thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one. I genuinely like the seating position of this Buick. I am in the right spot. A lot of manufacturers could learn from this. The wheel is nice and tall right in front of me. This is perfect. You know, sometimes people feel like, oh, well, I look like a little old lady if I'm sitting down there. No, you go get in a carbon bucket GT3 and you're going to be sitting maybe a little bit lower than this, but not by much. This is what you want. You want that wheel right in front of you. That's beautiful. I've got lots of open space here. I don't feel claustrophobic whatsoever. It's a road tripper. I feel like I could spend hours in this thing.